Hello, everybody, and welcome to Documentation Not Included, a tech industry podcast presented by DNI Stream, the live knowledge repository for software professionals. I figured if I went a little slower today, I'd get it. Yay! It's Thursday, 7 p.m. British time. We're live on twitch.tv/DNI Stream. I'm Josey Howarth, and as always, I am joined by the man who pretty much brings a smile to my face every time that I see him, Chris Seabach.
Hello, Josie, and hello to everybody in Twitch chat. As everybody already knows who listens to this show, it is live. You can get involved. Please do ask questions. If you've got any questions for our guest or you've got any comments or suggestions during the show, get involved and drop them over to us. So before we get going, let us introduce our guest for this week, Shai Reznik. And I've just been informed, just during the intro, he just dropped it onto me in the last minute, that I spelt his name incorrectly in the overlay. So I'm really sorry about that, Shai. You now have an opportunity to introduce yourself. Tell everybody how your name is properly spelt, and tell me off for that. And
Okay, so first of all, thanks for that, for the misspelling. All my life, I'm walking around with this fear of someone will add a C in my last name, and it's not with the C. So thank you. Now my biggest fear is now happening in front of my eyes. Anyway, it doesn't matter. My name is Shai, and I'm Shai, and I'm a software developer and all that stuff. But my main passion these days is testing and Angular, and combining the two together to create like a giant robot, and help people increase their confidence. Basically, that's my mission. I have it on my wall here in my office. It like making developers happy and confident by making testing easy and thorough. So this is my correct mission.
I like it.
That's a very good mission.
It's not far off what our mission statement is. We basically, this podcast is, it does two things for us. We keep sane by doing streams, because we both work at home all the time, regardless of the whole current situation in the world. And secondly, we want to teach other people, and we want to get people into development. So that kind of attitude is exactly what we want from our guests. We want people who are open to teaching people and bringing people into our world and making it more accessible. So thanks for that. Excellent.
Awesome. Yay.
So before we go too far, we are going to have our icebreaker question. This is just a random question that is designed to, I guess, show an insight into ourselves as individuals. And
wait, before you do that,
yes.
I noticed another mistake in the overlay. Okay, so Shai Reznik with the C. Oh, you fix it.
I have fixed it, yes.
N developer. You need to remove the N. Developer and testing advocate from So I'm not from Hi-Res Studios. So Hi-Res Studios is like a game development company, and they will sue me if I will say that I'm...
And that's very valid. We need to change that immediately, then I shall do that.
Yeah, so Hi-Res.io or testangular.com. This is like probably testangular.com. It's the same. It's okay. I consolidate it into one thing. And yeah, so that's, sorry. Now continue with the question.
No, hey, these are things that we have to cover. And hey, we wouldn't be able to do a live show without at least 1 or 2, maybe 5 technical difficulties. That is life. But yes, we have our icebreaker question. The entire point of this is to just share fun stuff. So I've got a good one for you. Has to do with Wi-Fi today. What is one of the neatest Wi-Fi connecting router names you have ever run across in all of your travels? Anything that you have ever seen that has just made you stop and go, wow, that's actually really smart or silly, or it made you just laugh?
Guests honor. I've got a few.
Okay, so I don't remember like one that I saw. Usually it's like free Wi-Fi and stuff like that. But I saw an image, I think yesterday, of like a meme or something like that. That like a free so the password was like in a coffee shop, and the password like buy something or leave. This was the Wi-Fi
Interesting
password.
marketing strategy for
Yeah.
the coffee shop. Chris?
Well, I unfortunately, but for this particular question, I don't really connect to other people's Wi-Fi. I either use my phone, my internet connectivity of my phone, or I don't connect to Wi-Fi. I don't really trust public Wi-Fi for most of the things that I do. However, my Wi-Fi is called Heaven, because all of my computers and all of my devices in my house are either named after deities across the whole spectrum of the religious kind of world.
Pantheons?
Yes, I am atheist myself, but beside the point, I call my computers this. The reason behind that is because my very, very first computer when I got it was a Pentium 2 400 dual core, and it was God at the time. So I called my very first computer God, and it's just went from there. I've got Zeus, I've even got made up deities as well from computer games like Final Fantasy 7 and things like that. So so
Nice.
Heaven is the best route
We'll
in
see.
I think.
In my particular case, frequent listeners of the show know that I'm very much so into the security world. So for me, walking around, like, sort of not necessarily eavesdropping or war driving, so to speak, but like listening and passing by all of the different SSIDs and things just to see what happens to be out there. I think one of the best that I've run across is totally legit Wi-Fi that is free, I promise.
I've seen
And
something like that before as well, yeah.
And I have to say, it just makes me smile. But I also saw an image as well, because love Reddit. It's the greatest place to find things like this. But it was a house, like someone was in an apartment building, and two neighbors that were near each other were having conversations through their SSIDs. And things like, your music is really loud. Do you really like Mariah Carey? Why are you listening to K-pop? Like, this whole conversation happening through SSIDs. It's like,
Nice.
I wish I could communicate with my neighbour that way, but there's no way that next door actually connect to the internet. He's just doesn't look like the type who's on the internet.
oh wow.
Anyway, so after that, our today's show has a very imaginative title: Angular Testing. It says exactly what it does on the tin, and so we're just going to start with a very simple question. Shai, why is code testing so awesome? And if that's not a loaded question, I don't know what it is.
Let's just ask the really easy questions to
Yeah,
start,
let's start
right?
with the easy stuff. Well, I have thought about this question a lot, and my answer is that we are all, like, every software developer is also a tester. Like, even if you are if you mean to do it, or if you meant to do testing or not, you are a software tester. Because like, let's take a client-side developer, for example. Okay, you write something, and then what do you do to test it, to check it? You test it in the browser, manually. You refresh the page, or you have like the auto refresh, and you see the result, and you compare it with what you expect, and that's a test. Okay, so the first, and like, this is testing. Okay, so it's called manual testing, and what we're talking about today is automated testing. So what's the benefit?
The thing is, the tests run automatically, but they're not automated because the developers still have to write them.
Right. So that's
So
right. We're still not in 2040 yet.
No.
But yeah. So
even if someone could produce it, I wouldn't trust AI to write my tests for me.
Yeah. A lot of cat images. Yeah. So the point of automated test is like it runs automatically and reruns all the tests that you've written. So instead of manually going and checking your the result and the expected result, you just write it in code, and then the test runner runs it for you. So this alone saves you days and months of aggregated time over years, and that alone is the benefit, like the first benefit that I see to it, like saves you the time. But it also, as humans, have a short amount of stuff we can like keep in our RAM memory, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we test some feature and everything is okay, and we move on to the next feature, and then we probably forget about something. We probably broke something else, and we won't ever. Never saw a person, like a developer, who went back and manually tested the entire enterprise application, okay, by hand. So
They
that's
can't.
why
They
the
can't
second
do regret. This is what we're getting into a regression testing area here. You can't test everything as a developer. We're only human, and we also forget what we've written. You just touched on that. Even one of the clients I'm working with at the moment, they do not do any kind of testing. They want me to start looking at what they think is the best type of testing for their software, which is integration testing only. We both know that that is not true. You and I, Shai, and maybe Josey to some extent, know that integration testing it's needed and it's necessary in some situations, but it is not the best way to do testing when it comes to code, because it doesn't cover the smaller, more granular cases, and it doesn't lend itself very well to test-driven development and dependency injection, which we're going to get onto in a minute. And I think for me, the reason that as a developer, the reason that code testing is so awesome for me is that it allows me to, as you just said, move on to different projects, move into different workflows, and then come back and then run a set of tests and confirm that what I previously thought was true or asserted is still true now. And then when I implement new code that's got its own set of tests, and I put that code in with the other code that I've written tests for, I can assert that the new code hasn't broken the old code. And this is kind of a regression test, not a full regression test, but it implements.
A metaphor I had for it is like you signed a contract and you have a legal team in your company that whenever you break that contract, they like shout at you, "What are you doing? We have a contract. You need to follow the contract." So that's like the analogy of the test runner. And you pointed out like the integrated testing and versus so integrated testing is like testing a bunch of stuff together, like a bunch of classes, maybe the boundary is not clear, so it's like either end-to-end test without like faking anything and testing the entire thing, and it has its benefits and it has its downsides. And the opposite thing is to isolate your classes or functions or whatever and test them in isolation by faking all of their dependencies. And that's another benefit like that I see for this type of testing when I do my tests, when I write my test or develop my features, is that I can focus on a very simple and small unit of code and just verify, like think about a method or a function and just focus on that, and like it's like focus only on that and zoom out, or like clear out all the other noise and just make sure that this task and this thing works, and I don't need to power up Chrome or whatever server or all the shenanigans just to test the simple function.
And I don't need to create a database with all the tables and create a file system. Sometimes you might want to mock a file. Even just things like saving a file to a disk, you can mock up. There is a potential for when you do write code like that. So let's say, for example, I know we're talking about Angular in a little bit, more specifics around Angular. But say, for example, I'm writing a PowerShell script that copies something from one place and puts it in another place. To me, the thing that I need to test there is that the copy function works, or there might be something I do in between the copy, a transform of some description. What I'm actually testing is the stuff that happens between the two file systems. So I don't want to have to rely on the file systems working. And that's what a unit test, that's where it shines, because I can mock up the file system on both sides, and I can by mocking, what we mean is that we make the dependency do exactly what we want it to do.
You basically fake it.
Yeah, you fake what's going to happen. So you expect it to return true, or you expect it to return, yes, I have written to the file system, or whatever, a 0 or 1, whatever. You return that back to your function, and then your unit test can focus on the unit of code that you're actually writing. And that's the value of the more granular testing.
That's, I think, a key thing.
Yeah.
I think that's giving. I mean, building on what Shai was saying about focus. I mean, when I first started out in development, I was in C and things like that. So this is sort of back in the day. I used to get completely overwhelmed by absolutely everything, all the different components and how everything was supposed to build on top of each other. And of course, back in that day, commenting and things documentation wasn't really stressed in my educational life, which is one of the reasons why we're called documentation not included. But by having tests and by actually writing tests, I find that I can, with the focus, actually prevent myself from going overboard as well.
Yeah.
Because back in the day when I first started learning about how to do classes and how to instantiate and then build on everything that goes with it, I used to put way too much in. So my concept was less about breaking everything down into manageable parts, but just shove everything into one file, and that's the program. And that doesn't work well.
That's called a God method or a God class.
Yeah. Yeah. I learned the hard way that is not the way to go.
Lots of software has that in it, and the better way to write software these days is to make it more modular and doing proper unit testing, dependency injection, inversion of control, mocking, that kind of thing. That it doesn't force you, but it encourages you as a developer to be more concise, more terse when you write code, and be better at programming. And I did an example on live stream the other day where I took one of my friends. He wrote a node bot, a chat bot, and I took one of my friends' huge classes that did everything. It connected to Discord. It connected to God itself. It did absolutely everything.
Heaven.
Yeah, and it copied heaven into hell. It was ridiculous. It did everything, and fair enough. The application has become a very overly architected application for what it is, but I've got bigger plans for it, so it makes sense. But everything is much smaller now. Everything's got a test written against it, and each method is very self-explanatory. So when I do want to do this copy from one place to another, or I want to just connect to Discord, that's 3 lines of code. I might have 5 tests for it, but I've got 3 lines of code that just connects to Discord, returns a connection, and that's it.
And exactly, you have also, Josey, to your point, you have also the documentation written for it. So live documentation for your code, which changes with the code.
Funny you say that, because Jodaba in chat just said my favorite thing about TDD is the self-documentation and the way of seeing if I bork something. Now, bork is a technical term and is one, it's a very important technical term.
It's from Seinfeld, no? I don't remember, but
it's been around for longer than that, I think. But yeah, it's something we use a lot.
It's absolutely, but yeah, it is that whole self-documentation process. And in fact, it's actually led me to start questioning how to do documentation nowadays, but that's a topic for another show.
It is indeed.
Sliding back in, go ahead, Chris.
So we talked about the benefits. We talked about kind of what or how awesome test-driven. We can tell. I mean, when I talk about test-driven development or unit tests, I get excited because I want every developer in the world to understand their value. I want them to understand the value, not just for themselves and the way that it improves them as a developer and improves their code and improves the maintenance and all the other benefits, but also for everybody else that they work with. If you're working in a team doesn't matter how big it is, but if you're working in a team and you all have tests, instead of somebody looking at your code and going, God, this method's 300 lines long and it does everything, and there's no tests, and I don't know, I'm going to have to F5 all the way through every single line to figure out where it's broken. But other than that, I can actually pinpoint.
F5, you mean break, right?
Well, F5 is step through in certain IDEs, F8,
Just
F10,
stepping
whatever,
through.
you know.
Yeah. Okay. Just making that clear for it's different. It's different for each IDE
Yeah,
that you
mine is
use, but in this
F8,
case,
and
it's-
F8 is the best, not
F8
F5.
is the best,
okay?
obviously. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there you
But the fact is that I don't need to with tests.
there you go. Debate begins.
I can run the individual test that has broken, if it's broken. If it hasn't broken, I can figure out where it is, and I can just fix one part of the code, and that shouldn't break other parts because I've asserted that that method returns the right thing. If the tests are wrong, then that's a different matter, and that means that you've written the test wrong in the first place, or the assumptions have changed over time and the tests haven't been kept up to date. But that's a discipline thing more than anything.
Yeah.
So I remember earlier on you said that it's a time saver. I agree overall over the long term. Over an entire project, I absolutely agree. In fact, not just an entire project, a life cycle of a product. Testing is a time saver. But for people who have never written tests before, what all they see, especially developers that have never ever seen a unit test or care about it,
especially project managers
and
stuff.
project
The bean
managers and
counters.
business
Yes.
analysts and business owners and even technical business owners that actually might write code themselves, they see the fact that you've got 3 lines of code and you've got 40 lines of code to test it, or even more potentially, depending on how complicated those 3 lines of code and what they're doing is.
Yeah.
So I'm going to challenge you to answer why. I mean, I've just kind of went over, but the overhead of that. What do you? How do you justify that to the people who don't understand?
That's one of the most recurring questions I always get. And so the way I look at it is as follows. You are going to, like I said, you're going to test your code anyway. And what I see when people ask this question is like, does it justify the cost of, like, the cost is not necessarily writing the test. The cost is learning how to write proper tests in the first place. And you have all these layers of knowledge that you need to cover, like the syntax and the structure and what to do in certain scenarios and what to test and what not to test, and which tools to use and how to like speed up the tools. And you have all this like immense amount of knowledge to acquire, and you don't know where to start from. And most of the time, the reason that I started testangular.com, and my future plan is to, do it for testing in general, is to provide a clear way from zero knowledge to like TDD every day, getting the benefits, yay, okay, like in a fun way, but in a very methodical way of like building the layers slowly. Because what I see most of the time is people hear about the benefits, like people are listening now, they hear about the benefits, they want to jump on the testing train, and they open up Google and they search for testing, and they see 2 terms, unit and integration, which I believe are the wrong terms to describe tests, because they are like, again, over the years I discovered there are like 3 testing dimensions that I see that we can divide test into, and unit and integrations live in 2 different dimensions. I can expand on that later if you want. So you are Googling it, you go into a blog post that tells you, oh, you should write only integration test, like you said before, or you should write a unit test, and then you write unit test and something breaks, and your unit test is passing, but something still breaks in your app. And then you get into this mess of like testing stuff you don't have to mess, and your tests break a lot, and you go and you find yourself spending time maintaining stuff you don't really understand, like why you wrote this way, but you just saw it in some blog. And now you need to maintain it, and it costs more. So people start, I see this cycle, they start after 2 months or so, they say, okay, we try testing, it doesn't work, let's like do like disable all the tests and go back to our
comment them all out.
panic mode.
Or
right?
my favorite one, make certain that everything passes in the tests,
Yeah, of course.
and then push that to the the version control, and you go through the actual pipeline. And oh man, when I see that, something inside me dies a little.
Yeah,
I think
Just a little.
I have a similar scenario quite often because I do contract work quite a lot for my clients, and I will not write code even under my client's request without tests, because I know how valuable it is for my process. If someone asks me to deliver a piece of software or even a library or a API or something, and I don't feel like I've tested it, I cannot validate and give them the value that I've written a quality product, because I know how valuable testing is. So
yeah,
it's
so how yeah,
it doesn't matter.
I totally agree.
I just say no to a contract if people say I've got the beauty of doing that.
I think one of the more difficult things to try to quote unquote justify, going back to your question there, Chris, the justification of testing, period, tends to be lost when there's no tangible sort of feel to it. Like if I sit there and I develop code and all of a sudden there's a button that bounces around while your mouse tries to chase it, that is for lack of a better term, a tangible result that can be seen by the encounters.
You can have tangible like goals to or like KPIs you track. Key performance indicators, to those of you who are not marketers. So the thing you can track is the amount of unexpected bugs you have in each sprint. So you plan your sprint, and then you have all of a sudden you have a call, production is down or something is wrong in this feature, and you need to stop everything and go and fix that. You can track this stuff. And the thing is, and you need to be realistic when you introduce testing, you need to take it slow at the beginning and to introduce it only into like the easiest parts, because you have so much information to learn. You need to divide it. So for example, in Angular, the easiest part like to test is a service, and even a pure service without any dependencies. So I always suggest start with that and just learn like the like I told you, the syntax and the structure and all that stuff only on services, on pure services for like the first sprint. Okay.
You know what?
And after that, add
your TDD.
Exactly.
Our DNI website,
a while,
our DNI website only has tests for the services, because that's one of the first places that I started looking at Angular testing. And I did it exactly like you said, because I realized that the services are the simplest things to mock and to work with, because they're more concise. Components and front end stuff is a lot more complicated, which we were going to get into later.
Yeah, and so what you can do is to say, okay, we're going to add testing. Our hypothesis is it's going to, if you need to track what you currently have, like the bug rate you currently have, like the unexpected bug rate, let's say, the time developer wastes on unexpected bugs. And let's say you have like out of the 2-week sprint, you have 4 days, which is a lot, that is going into fixing unexpected things. So your hypothesis is, you say that, okay, we're going to invest, let's say, and not everyone on the team, like let's take Chris and Josey and have them learn about us and implement them and introduce it to the team. And it will take them, I don't know, like 1 month of learning and experiencing, like over a period of, I don't know, 5 months. Okay, 1 month of it will go for like adding tests or learning about it and stuff like that, and practicing. And then after that period of time, then we start tracking, the improvement levels. And after, let's say, 8 months, where our hypothesis is that we'll reduce it into 1 day, because you won't cover, especially if you have already like a big software, you won't cover everything, but you start with the critical things first, and you cover that with tests. And then you can prove that this effort was successful. But I personally never seen anyone track like the unexpected bug rate and stuff like that. And it's a gut feeling for most of people. If you can convince, if you're a good salesman or a woman, you can convince, your manager that we need to add tests.
That there are no tests. I think a lot of the time, if you're a good salesperson, you can convince people that you don't have any bugs either in your software. I've had clients tell me that there are no bugs.
It's a feature.
I have had clients very recently tell me that there are have very few bugs in their software.
Good for them.
Is that because they actually have good testing, or is that because they don't have people to report?
This particular client has zero testing. They do have people to report them, and I have seen the bugs that get reported. There is plenty of bugs. They just do not consider. They don't monitor them. As Shai said, they do not. Produce metrics of any sort or really monitor how long. I think someone at the business is actually trying to do that and trying to move that forward. And I was kind of brought on to help them get to that situation. But they don't perform any kind of metrics or reporting for it.
Because if you think about it, most of the time, developers who are used to a certain way of developing stuff, you fall back on what you know best. And what you know best is developing the feature and ship the thing. And you denial, you give your future self more headache, okay? But it's not you, it's your future self. Mm-hmm. So you don't care. So you will deal with the bugs when they will arise. And that's what most of the people I feel doing. And when you start learning about testing, you say, it's too complicated. Let me go back because I have a deadline. In 2 days, I need to deliver this feature. I need to stop. So, and if you're unrealistic about adding tests, about like the time you need to add, most of the people add like 2 days of testing in the end of the sprint. Nobody ever gets to these 2 days. That's where TDD comes into play, and we'll talk about it. But that's falling back on the habits of what you're used to is what I speak about. So I have a free workshop that I teach about more principles and like meta stuff. And one of the things is developing the habit. Like, how do you develop a habit of changing the way you are used to writing tests, and switching it into a TDD flow? So TDD is test-driven development, is when you actually write the test before you write the code. And anyone who never written a test in their life, it sounds very scary.
And madness. And it sounds absolute madness.
Yeah, and I agree.
For some, it's completely illogical because you write failing tests to start. And
exactly.
It's like, but what? But it makes perfect sense. And it takes a while to get to that mindset if you've never experienced it.
Yes. And I was afraid as well when I first heard it. I heard about it. I think it was 2008 or 9, something like that. And I was like, what? Nah. Well, what is that? And then when I started, and even till this day, one of my strategies is when I don't know how to do stuff, I don't start with a complicated thing. I start with the easiest thing. So when you start testing your code, don't start with TDD right away. First of all, again, it's layers. So develop master the first layer, which is the syntax, and then the tools, and then the structure. And only when you know how to test certain parts, we test after you've written the feature, then you can start with saying to yourself, okay, for this sprint, I will take 2 methods and I will write a test first for them, because I already know the syntax. I already know how to test. I already can anticipate what needs to be done. It will take me longer at first to wrap my head around it, but then I slowly develop the habit. Now these days, when I have new API that I need to get familiar with, I never write in TDD. I know people who do that, but I personally, I still stuck with the mindset, like the habit of first, let me understand the API, understand the new like language or framework or a library or something like that, just play with it without tests. And once I get it, now I can switch to writing the test because I already have the API in my head, familiar and stuff like that.
That's exactly what I do. For example, I just picked up a for the bot that I'm writing for Discord. I am adding Twitch support to it. So I looked around and I had a look at a few Node.js Twitch APIs. I figured the one that I wanted to use because of the features that were available. And now I'm writing the implementation in the classes, which are all ready for test-driven development. That all of the dependencies are being injected as I would expect them to be. I'm making the methods work. I'm half test-driven development, but I'm not actually writing any tests yet. I'm thinking about how I need to write the tests, but I'm learning the API, figuring out how it works, getting it fully working, and then I don't know if you do this, Shai, but once I get it fully working, I will comment everything out within the method, and then I will write my tests, and then I will either uncomment things out, or I will refactor and rewrite them as I need to for the methods, and then I'll remove them into different methods, etc. I don't know if you do that or not.
Interesting. I sometimes I do it. I don't do it like in a methodical way like that, like comment everything out. Sometimes I will do it for like a few lines or something like that. I use it, to the listeners. So you have tools like code coverage tools that shows you which lines you actually, pass through. It doesn't mean that you tested all the scenarios there, but it just means that you didn't skip this line, okay, in your test. So it's like a kind of like a first safety net, just to know that I cover, like I touch that place, and then I go like I do it for like more complicated lines. But that's interesting. I will try to incorporate it next time when I do like when I learn a new API and we'll try it, and I will let you know how it goes. So thanks for the tip.
It's actually something I've learned from Chris, because we've done live streams, because we try to do as much development as we can on a live stream for the stuff that we do for documentation not included, because it's not our day job. This is love of what we do and wanting to share, teach, and educate. And when he started doing the TDD, it was interesting to watch, because he does do this sort of blanket reslate, and it makes me think of a little bit of what Jadaba has also added here about how the red-green refactor cycle is super weird for a lot of people, and it's hard to get them over that hump. And the thing is, that is basically what you kind of do, Chris. Like you want to make certain you understand almost how to interact with the API, but then it's like, okay, now I have what I need to do, but I need to do my red, then do my green, and then refactor.
So I tend to architect the classes and the interfaces and the everything that needs to be put in place, the bare bones of the application. I'll tend to architect that first. Then if I need to learn something new, such as a new API, as we said, I will write that in raw code. Sometimes I'll even write it in a different class or write it in a different, get it working and play around with it in its own file or something to figure it out. Then I'll get that code working. And then, as I said, everything, it's like I could delete it all and then restart, but I like to comment it just so I can see, what I've done. But most of the time, it doesn't look like what I've actually written, because I'm being more concise with my code. I'm not prototyping anymore. So I rewrite things as I should, and my code ends up being very terse, very concise, and very easy to follow as well.
That's another safety net that you have, like when you have the green, like all the tests are passing, and you get to a stage. So I did a survey with my students and clients, and of what are the most like the two I don't know highest benefits to for in your opinion to testing. And the first place was confidence, like getting the confidence that I didn't break anything that when I pushed to production. And the second one was code quality. So, and for me, it's number one. Okay,
Code quality is
code
number one for me as well.
Yeah, and but for most of the people, it was like the confidence, which I get because this is the tangible benefit that you can show, to the business people. The business, I imagine people in suits in dark places. Anyway, so but the code quality, having the feeling, and I don't know if I can deliver the feeling over audio to the podcast or video, but the feeling of now have this kind of messy code that I just written real quick just to make the test pass, and now the test is passing, and I can I have time now to clear out things and move things the OCD kicks in, and it's just the greatest feeling in the world to clean up the code. So
do you know what I really enjoy? I enjoy old tests or tests that I've written 3 or 4 tests ago failing. I love it when that happens, because this is really sad, but
I thought you were going to say cigars. Okay, so
no, used to, not anymore. Yeah, whenever I see an old test fail, then usually, if I don't expect it, then to me that's if I don't expect it to fail, because usually I know which tests are going to fail whenever I write a new test, or I change something in the code flow or something. Because I'm very experienced, but if it fails and I don't know why, to me that says, oh, I've done something wrong and I'm going to learn something here. I'm going to figure something new out that I really didn't know, or there's an assumption that I've made that I've written incorrectly. Either I've written the test wrong, or maybe my control flow's wrong, and I learn from that process as I go along. So sometimes
also that's the confidence part, right? You have this test you written 3 months ago, and it fails, and all of a sudden you go, yes, I just saved my future self from waking up in 3 a.m. and going to the server and fixing in production, the code.
I actually specifically meant a test that I might have written just a few minutes ago. But in that instance, when I come back to code and something fails, then usually it's because I'm a bit rusty on that code base, and I've forgotten what I've done, or I've actually maybe come back into it and went, I'll tell you what, I'll just change that variable over to this or whatever, and I've not followed my own rules, and I should have written a test. And then that reminds me that I've done it wrong. The CI has failed for some reason, the builds have failed, and that's what they're there for.
Well, coding standards change over time. I mean, I remember back in the day when tab was the secret to success, and nowadays there's the communication of spaces or tab. Camel case.
Tabs do not exist anymore. Tabs do not exist.
But my point is, though, things change over time, and anything that you work on that is going to have a life cycle, which is pretty much every single piece of software ever, having those tests and having them fail means you will learn. But also, because you can tell I'm sort of slowly bringing things to an end, at least for this particular topic. But the confidence, I think, is important, because a lot of people don't feel that they're good coders. I know maybe 1 or 2 people on the back of my hand who feel like they know how to code, even though they've had 20 or 30 years in coding.
Yeah, the imposter syndrome.
It is the imposter syndrome. And honestly, I think we should everyone just accept we all have imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
But also my thought is completely lost because I just had a notification.
So you have the confidence in your coding ability, and you have the confidence in not breaking production. So these are 2 types of confidence which you get with testing. That's basically our sales message here.
So testing, yay, nay?
Yay, absolutely yay. If you don't test, you're doing it wrong. There you go. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that.
Wow, that is such a controversial stance to take, Chris. I don't know.
It's a hard stance, because I'm quite open to multiple, look, I'm quite open to most things, but I've come to the opinion these days that if you do not test, then you are doing yourself harm, you are doing your software harm, and you are doing your business harm. If you do not write at least a certain level of unit tests, and you're not structuring your software in that way, then you are asking for trouble in the future. You're asking for future you and future. You're actually asking for future developers in your team and future you to look at the code and go, "I've no idea what that does."
And I don't want to touch it because it might break.
And that happens all the time. I see that everywhere. Now, if there's a suite of tests, yes, people might still go, I don't know what that does and I don't want to touch it. But there's no real excuse, because if you give them enough time, they can go away and read the tests and run the tests and confirm that things are still working, and then write a new test that passes, then implement it. Their test will pass, and previous tests might fail, and they can look at the previous tests and either delete them if they're no longer appropriate, or they can change them and make them work for the new assumption. But then we have to know that when we do that, if we're not following solid, which if you are following solid, you shouldn't have broken previous tests because you were closed to modification.
We've discussed this before in the past, but I'm going to make you say it again. Explain solid.
So I don't know everything. I don't know all of the acronyms, but the O in solid is the open close principle, and basically that means that classes are open to addition and closed to modification. That might be a class or a method. So that means that once you've produced something and you've sent something out, generally you shouldn't really be changing that method. It's implemented and you've written your tests and your assertions. If you need to write an API override, for example, you would write an overridden method to do that. You wouldn't add to the existing method and then write additional tests that have branching logic, for example. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but generally if you follow solid strictly, you wouldn't do that. You would write a new method that implements the new piece of logic, because it would break any APIs or any interactions that it's currently interacting with. That doesn't mean, I said I don't necessarily agree with that, because I do go back and modify tests, but tests give you the confidence, as we've kept saying, that when you break something, or because it will inevitably happen as a developer, you will break all pieces of code, you will have an assumption or a red, you'll get a test that comes back that fails, that tells you that something has broken and you need to give it your attention. And you cannot and should not just comment it out, comment the test out. You should learn and understand why it's broken. And that's your job as a developer. Anyway, rant over.
Wow, go ahead, Shai.
No, I want to ask if we have time to talk about Angular testing and DOM testing, which are two topics that are related.
That was what we wanted to talk about today, but unfortunately we have come to the end of the show. But that does not mean
actually
that this is what happens with this show.
Do you know what this means, Shai? This means we're gonna have to have you come back.
Okay, no problem.
We're just going to have you come back. And when you come back, we can literally build on what we've talked about here and explicitly talk
the open
about
close. Yeah, the open close principle.
We can write some no tests.
No, we can close this discussion and open for open for extension in the future.
We can follow solid.
Exactly, in podcasts.
Oh, we've got a troll in chat. We've got a troll in chat, and they've just said, can't have failing tests if there are no tests. Get out.
Joe Daba, though, has been all about testing this entire time.
He has. He's winding us up.
Okay, so we've reached the point of our show where we get a chance to share something we've learned this week. This is called BYOM, or Bring Your Own Manual. It's our response to our TFM. And in this particular case, it's just something that you have learned that you think others might find interesting, or even perhaps, laugh and commiserate because they've been there before. That's going to be mine today, because mine is one of those, oh, yeah, I was being silly. But yes, do you have something that you have learned this week, Chris, that you might want to share with the class?
Yes, I do. I have actually learned something brand new a couple of days ago. And it's to do with Git, because I've been doing a lot of Git training and I've been reading a lot about the lower level aspects, and I've been trying to solve what I would refer to as fairly unique problems for one of my clients because of their workflows and because they don't have tests and because they do things that they probably shouldn't be doing in their repo, but they're in that situation and we are moving away from it. Anyway, so if you have a file in a Git repository that you want to ignore and you do not want to push to the repository, normally it's a binary file like the bin folder in C# projects or the node modules folder in Angular projects, in NPM-based projects. Normally you would add it to your .gitignore file. You would add a pattern to it or the full string.
Yeah.
In the instance where you have a file that's been added to your index, i.e. added to your staging area in Git, and you want to still ignore it on your local developer machine, I was not aware of a way to do that in Git. Normally in source control systems like SVN, you just don't push it because you select the files that you want to push and then you push them. Whereas here, if I want to change branches, say for example I've changed a configuration file, and that configuration file, because of the nature of the project, has to have individual developer settings in it because it's been designed in a particular way. We would use environment variables or something like that to say these days, but we can't because this is a legacy project. So these files have been modified. They are required by the build process, so they have to be in the index. They have to be pushed to Git, but we want to ignore them on our local development machine. I've never come across that scenario in Git before, since I've been using Git for the last, what I would say, 15 years, however long it's been, maybe 20 odd years. I can't remember when Git came out, but I've been using it for a while now.
We're all old. Just accept it. We're old.
There is a command you can use, and I'll just put it into chat, and it's called git update-index --assume unchanged file. And what that will do is on your local machine, it will ignore that file, and you can use --no -assume -unchanged file if you want to remove it from this particular setting. And it will stop the file from being pushed and stop it from being added when you use git add or when you try do commits or anything like that. It's a really handy tool if you need that situation. I tend to not design my software like that these days. Everything in my repository either belongs in the repository or doesn't belong in the repository, and configuration values are handled in lots of different ways. Anyway,
there's always edge cases.
I know I went into detail there, but that's a new thing I've learned this week.
Nice.
So, Shai, have you got anything that you've learned this week?
What are you, Shai? What have you learned?
Okay, so I recently released an open source library called Observer Spy, which in the Angular world, when you want to test observables, basically the only way up until recently you could do it by writing something that is called marble tests, right. Which is kind of funky. So I just borrowed an idea from the Java world and introduced it to JavaScript. And it's called like spying on observables. So it's Observer Spies. So I released this, and what I learned is that, so I heard about this thing called Github Actions, but I didn't really get into it because I have a life. And
an insult. We've got GitHub Actions on our repository.
Oh, sorry, I stepped on some toes there. Sorry, I didn't mean. I have
it's okay. Go on.
Okay,
You've
cool.
made your bed now.
Okay. So I used to like have a template of like Travis CI like script that releases new versions and stuff like that. And a friend told me like, hey, you can do this now with GitHub Actions, and you don't really have to worry about Travis and and that. And my logical self went, well, okay, but I have already the template, and I don't need to invest the time to learn about GitHub Actions. But my crazy curious developer soul went, oh, a nice new thing, to learn. Why not? Let's spend a lot of time on that I don't have. So GitHub Action can deploy your software without Travis. That's great. And another thing that I learned is, so I recently, like I told you, I started like releasing tools because one, like part of my mission is building better testing tools that are not exist. that don't exist.
I'll have a look at that, to be fair, because testing observables is a problem in Angular, and if that solves my problem, great, I'll use it.
Yeah, let me know. And so I started, and I don't have a lot of experience with like PRs and stuff like that. I've been doing it for a couple of years, but very small projects, so not a lot of action, pun intended. Anyway, so so I learned that for VS Code, they have a GitHub extension now that they're all the same company, Microsoft and GitHub. They released a GitHub extension which lets you see all the PRs and issues in your VS Code and just like decide, okay, I'm working on this PR, and will create the Git branch and all that stuff, and let you like answer issues inside of VS Code, which is super cool. And does the whole merge and or rebase and merge and stuff like that. So that's a great extension. So these
So
are
the
my
last thing we really need is for VS Code to just simply become the operating system, right? Because you just do pretty much everything in the PowerShell. Well, you can run PowerShell.
Yeah.
Through VS Code, why not?
I often do, but you can't run anything complicated. Try
No,
and run a
you
6-hour
cannot.
migration script through PowerShell in the integrated PowerShell console in VS Code. Does not like that.
Yeah, I usually
not when there's 20 meg of text output from the migration script. No,
I usually use Console Z for that.
I just use PowerShell script, PowerShell core for running things like that. But yes, it's good, but it's not that good.
So you guys are all about code. Mine's a really simple one. I develop sites locally on my system, and while I was working, I'm migrating over to Dockerization for everything. And I prefer to work with SSL, even locally. And I went in and set up the certs and everything, and I forgot to actually install the root cert on my system. So I had every single possible browser that I've got for testing everything on the front side of what I do, yelling at me. And it took me way too long to realize why. And when I did, I basically facepalmed. So if you happen to work with things like OpenSSL or other things like that, make certain that you don't just create the certs, you actually install the root cert. Yeah, okay, because that's kind of important. So that's mine. Very simple, very quick. And
I think if you use CertBot, it does all that for you. CertBot's an extension with OpenSSL.
Yeah, but the particular Docker setup and things that I'm using actually has the root go into my stuff. There's some weird things that I'll explain it another time, because I definitely want to do something about it on stream when we go and do stuff. But in my case, it's just I kind of forgot the root, and there's nothing like having the browsers go, you've got the site.local and the cert is for site.local, but it's not valid. And I'm like, I haven't seen that before. So of course I had to show my husband. I'm like, look at this. And he's just like, that is software gore. And I'm like, yeah, it has to be, until you realize it's 100% human error.
I was doing some work with certificates this week, and I have one of the reasons that the command that I put in, the git command, came up is that one of the config files requires a unique thumbprint from a certificate for authenticating over a web interface for a particular service, but each developer has to put their own local thumbprint in the config file. So not only is that a security concern, because people can accidentally push that to the server. It's not a major security concern because it's only local certs, but that means that people have to configure and sign their own certificates, and it's a nightmare. And it isn't necessary. It's just misconfigured, if you know what I mean. So yeah, it's additional requirement.
Small, tiny little problems. But yes, we have now officially reached the end of our show. A massive thank you to everybody on Twitch who is watching, whether you commented or not, for participating, and to all of you in the future who are listening to us on the podcast. Hello. Finally, Shai, a massive thank you to you for joining us. I do hope that you have had fun. We haven't had a chance to dig in as deep as we've wanted to. Like I said, you have to come back. But this is also a chance to pimp anything you want now.
Oh, nice. So I have a good a food truck business that I wanted to plug. No, I have a free workshop about testing that I open every couple of every couple of months or so. It's called the Roadmap to Angular Testing Mastery, and basically it's relevant for all frameworks, most of the material there. And it's on testangular.com, so you can go and register, and you get a nice surprise in the email, regardless of this free workshop. And that's if you want to learn more, that's where you can find me, and on Twitter.
I have to say, you have absolutely demolished the hopes and dreams of Jodaba. They were really excited about that food truck.
Oh, sorry, Jodaba. Sorry. I will. In the end of the free workshop, you can see the details for my food
We have
truck
a
if
bag
you
of
have.
crisps.
Yeah,
Bring a bag of
exactly,
crisps.
exactly.
Oh, man. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you very much for having me. By the way.
Absolutely. I
Oh,
mean, you've been a wonderful guest, and I said sorry we didn't get deep into the Angular side of things, which is where we wanted to go. But unfortunately, sometimes conversations just take that dip. We end up going in one direction. We still kept it mostly on topic, which is good for us.
Yeah, you can change the name of the episode to testing in general, and you can record now like hey, welcome to the episode of testing, or just remove the Angular part, and you'll be
I'll
okay.
replace my introduction with what you've just said there in post. There we go.
Awesome.
Oh, good grief.
So yes, time for our pimpage. You can visit our website on www.dnistream.live. You can catch all of our podcasts there, everything we've done, links to our YouTube, links to our Fireside, and links to all of our podcast discovery platforms as well. You can also use it to contact us for any reason whatsoever. If you've got a comment, you've got questions, you've got suggestions for any topics, or you even want to be a guest on the show, we shall speak to you and see what you want to talk about. If you do, we're always open to anybody. Do not worry about that imposter syndrome. Give us a call. We've got a few slots free, and we're always welcome. We always welcome people on the show. We have people who are technical and non-technical, so don't worry too much about that either if you've got a particular subject that you want to talk about. And do not forget to follow our Twitch channel if you haven't already. It is below us that way. There we go.
It depends on whether you have it on mobile or you have it on desktop, whether you have it full screen, not full screen, and whether there's a lot. Their UI needs love.
And
They're
thank you for
trying
the
to fix their
follow
UI,
there,
but in all honesty,
Shai.
thank you. Yay! But yes, and lastly, the audio versions of our podcast are available at 7 a.m. British time on Monday following the stream. And it'll go out to everything from Spotify to Google Play to Apple Podcasts to the places. They're everywhere. Now, we hope to see you all next week live because the participation and conversation is fantastic. And it'll be 7 p.m. UK time, twitch.tv/DNI stream. All that is left to do is say goodbye. So, Chris, say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Wow.
This is my ending note. I was saving it for the goodbye.
An ending note.
Wait, weren't you going to sing, Shai?
Oh, yeah. Did you end the...
No, we've not gone yet. If you're singing, then get singing.
Okay.
No. If you want to sing, go right ahead.
Yeah, I just want to sing the goodbye. Okay, so this is the opening note. Okay. Goodbye.
And this is me saying goodbye. Have a good one, everyone. Bye.
See you next week.